emissary to the Islamic potentates of Tripoli. And they asked him, why is it that you are seizing our ships and kidnapping American citizens? Anybody remember that? They used to do that. They had this conversation, and then they documented this conversation in a letter to the Congress, which now sits in the Library of Congress. It is a matter of historical record that Thomas Jefferson never had an iftar dinner at the White House. It's a matter of historical record that this is the documentation that memorializes this exchange between these two U.S. ambassadors, who both, by the way, I think you know, became U.S. presidents, and the emissary to the Muslim states, the Muslim state of Tripoli. We took the liberty to make some inquiries concerning the grounds of their pretensions to make war upon nations who had done them no injury, and observed that we considered all mankind as our friends who had done no wrong to us, nor given us any provocation. The ambassador answered that it was founded on the laws of their prophet, that it was written in their Quran, that all nations who should not have acknowledged their authority were sinners, that it was their right and duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found, and to make slaves of all who could take prisoners, and that every Muslim who should be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. That's a letter written by two future presidents as ambassadors to the United States in their exchange in 1786. How many of you can tell me who wrote this? Muhammad declared undistinguishing and exterminating war as a part of his religion against all the rest of mankind. The precept of the Quran is perpetual war against all who deny that Muhammad is the prophet of God. The vanquished, the dhimmi, may purchase their lives by the payment of tribute. As the essential principle of Muhammad's faith is the subjugation of others by the sword, it is only by force that his false doctrines can be dispelled and his power annihilated.
Jefferson.
John Quincy Adams.
Also,
President of the United States.
Also say Kutu.
Now, if you read what Theodore Roosevelt said about Islam, what Winston Churchill said about Islam, what St. Thomas Aquinas said about Islam, you will get the exact same thing, because those men were not unencumbered by anything. They looked at what it is. They looked at the doctrine. They looked at what it said, and they listened when these guys told them straight to their face, this is who we are. You know that's why we have letters of marque. That's why we have a standing navy in our Constitution and not a standing army. Because the first war this country fought after the revolution was against the Muslim states who were waging jihad on the high seas against us and in other areas. That's why Marines have what we have in our uniform and from the shores of Tripoli. This is not something new that we're fighting. This is just a repeat. But we've forgotten this. This is the cost. Now, what I'd like to do is show you a couple of these things. I just talked about Mohammed Majid. Here's the Countering Violent Extremism Working Group, Homeland Security Advisory Council. This is dated 2010. There's Mohammed Majid. Same guy. I want to do something with regards to Islamic law while we're talking about the Adams Center, and then I'm going to let it peel into a discussion on Islamic law, because I told you we'd do that. And then when I'm done with that, what I'd like to do, since we'll have a pretty good amount of time before I have to give up the stage, is go into a few other discussions about what you can do, what we're seeing at the local level, what's effective, what's not. But this next 15 or 20 minutes, I think, is important to do this. Now, I'm going to need a volunteer, and if someone would like to volunteer, you can, but if you don't, I'm just going to pick you. So would somebody like to volunteer to assist? And do we have a microphone, okay? Can you pass that young lad a microphone? Now, let me set this up so everybody knows what we're going to do here. Remember, we just talked about the Adams Center you can stay where you are. We talked about the Adams Center. It's a Muslim Brotherhood front. If you go to the Adams Center's website, you see there are 5 subtitles or 6 subtitles on there homepage. One of them is zakat. Who knows what zakat is? Not you, yes, sir. Yeah. Donations. That's kind of. Is it? You can if you want. You don't have to if you don't want. No, right. It's mandatory. It's mandatory, given mandated by Islamic law. Mandated. There are rules. And if you click on it, you get this. You get the zakat calculator. And if you see it, it's a form. You go to most of these websites, and it shows you, here's your income, here's your mortgage payment, here's your other debts, here's all this, and it spits out a number. And since I like keeping things simple, let's say it spits out the number 8,000. There are 8 categories of zakat that have to be paid into. So you can give to an organization that will take all your 8,000 and they'll give 1,000 to each of the 8 categories. Or you can give 1,000 here. You can decide to give 1,000 here. That as long as the 8 categories, that's the legal requirement. Is everybody with me? Okay, I'm going to re-explain this in a second. But it's mandatory. Now, if you go to how the money is distributed, you actually get this. Interestingly enough, it says, Adams will be pleased to accept your zakat contributions and in turn spend the funds it collects in the best possible ways approved by Sharia, Islamic law. So they're telling you they're abiding by Islamic law. That's what they're doing. Fair? Well, okay. I just happen to have this book of Islamic law here. It's the Reliance of the Traveler. At ISNA's last convention, just a few months ago, they told the entire audience, this book is mandatory, should be in every Muslim house in America. Why? Because this is what you should be following. And if I open it up to the front, we're going to do this a little more in a moment, but for the purposes of this discussion, it has the imprimatur of the International Institute of Islamic Thought. For those of you that have forgotten, that's one of the Muslim Brotherhood front groups we talked about, and it's signed by the President of the Fiqh Council of North America. Do you know what that means? That means the Fiqh Council that oversees that the Brotherhood abides by Islamic law says this is good law, and it's published in Beltsville, Maryland, in English, and it's 14th century Islamic law. They say, ISNA says everyone should have one of these and use it. So you know what that tells me? I call that a clue that the Muslim Brotherhood in America says this is good law. Is Adams a Muslim Brotherhood front?
Yes.
Yes. Can I then use this as the Sharia they're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. I can. This is pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to Book H, which is oddly called Zakat, and I'm going to go to the point where it talks about distributing zakat. I'm going to read something for you. This is Book H, Zakat, Chapter 8.7. It is obligatory to distribute one zakat among the 8 categories of recipients, meaning that zakat goes to none besides them, 1/8 of the zakat to each category. Are we all tracking? And then they list the 8 categories here in Islamic law. Well, what's interesting is, on the Adams website, they list 8 categories. It quotes Quran 960, if it's in the Quran, who said it? Allah, God, according to Islamic tradition, right? And let's go to this. Here are the 8 categories. So what I'm going to ask my volunteer to do is he's going to read the number and the first 2 words, and then I'm going to read what's in Islamic law, and we're going to see if there's any correlation between the 2. So, please.
Number 1, the poor.
And here in Islamic law, the poor. Go ahead.
Number 2, the needy.
Those short of money.
Number 3, zakah collection.
Zakat workers.
Number 4, the reconciled.
Those whose hearts are to be reconciled. This is tracking pretty closely, isn't it? I call that a 1-to-1 so far. Go ahead.
Number 5, the oppressed.
Those purchasing their freedom.
Number 6, the insolvent.
Those in debt. Are we tracking 1-to-1? 1-to-1. Go ahead.
Number 7, the cause. The cause of Allah.
Yep. Those fighting for Allah. The the seventh category is those fighting for Allah, meaning people engaged in Islamic military operations for whom no salary has been allotted in the army roster, but who are volunteers for the jihad without remuneration. They are given enough to suffice them for the operation, even if affluent, of weapons, mounts, clothing, and expenses for the duration of their journey round trip and the time they spend there, even if prolonged.
Mine doesn't say that.
Right. Now, if this is a Muslim Brotherhood front and this law applies to this, don't you think then that when Muslims read this, they know what this means? Because jihad fi sabilillah, and the cause of Allah, when you hear the cause of Allah, that is jihad. Jihad fi sabilillah. And they're telling you that when you give to zakat to the Adams Center, at least 1/8 goes, when you give zakat, at least 1/8 goes to the jihad, what we would call terrorism. Now, you can also give to the poor and the needy, the families of martyrs. Money also goes from there to the families of martyrs and other places. But that means every Muslim that gives to jihad gives to zakat is funding jihad. Because it's required by Islamic law.
That's why we have so many suicides on it.
Do I see that? Now, if you're an investigator, all you need to show is that, and then show one transaction. And you could actually prosecute the Adams Center and its leadership. How many of you think the Adams Center is under investigation? Glad to see no hands are up. Because that would be just annoying and hateful, and we would be, they'd probably be called every name in the book.
Did we just have Herman Cain appear at the ad?
Full that. Now, let's go to CARE's website. Does CARE qualify to receive zakat? Yes, they say. They do. And what does CARE give to? Only the seventh category. Jihad, well, they don't say jihad, but for those who strive in Allah's cause, fi sabilillah.
7 and 8. Yeah.
Seventh category. Why? Because CARE is
Hamas.
So, of course, all the money they raise goes to support the jihad. And finally, bringing this back around, kind of as a little bit of a closing on this whole thing is, I want to tie it all the way back to the beginning. Abdurrahman al-Amudi, the Al-Qaeda guy, created the Muslim chaplain program, right?
Yep.
He was the one responsible for certifying Muslim chaplains. Who certifies Muslim chaplains now for the Bureau of Prisons and the Department of Defense? The Islamic Society of North America. That might start to help you understand why we have some radicalization issues in our prisons. Because you got Hamas in there. That will pretty much do it. Yes, sir.
Would it not be the truth that the foreign aid that we give to Gaza, to Cairo, money for that would go to...
So his question is, would it be true then that money we give to like in Gaza, in foreign countries like Egypt? It could. We certainly know that, like with Pakistan, the money we've given them has gone in to develop their nuclear program, not to do the things that we wanted them to do. But of course, of course it would be. Of course it would be. All right, let me go right here. The founder of the Muslim Brotherhood said jihad is an obligation from Allah Almighty on every Muslim and cannot be ignored or evaded. And the question could be asked, well, what is jihad? Now, I find it amazing that in the Muslim world there is zero discrepancy on what the word jihad means when they're talking amongst themselves. Zero. Yet among us, in 2012, we're still debating it. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to kick that thing right out of the park right now, and I'm going to walk around and use some of you to help me. First, I'm going to turn back to this book, and before I do, I'm going to take a moment and slow down and do a couple things I just did. Number one, this book is published in Beltsville, Maryland, in English, okay? And it looks like this. screen's frozen for some reason.
No, go ahead, go ahead. Go.
Okay, well, at some point, that'll go forward, but if it doesn't, we're still going to work through this.